Hey everyone, Sleepy Reader here with yet another of the daily Sleepy videos. Today I just wanted to tell you about some comics I read in about the past 24 hours. Almost all of which were good, but one definitely to avoid. So there's a sneak peek of what I'm going to talk about. And the one to avoid is Faith and the Future Force. If you haven't already bought it and were thinking of picking it up in trade or even grabbing it from the $1 bins, I think it's not. It's just a waste of time, unfortunately. I mean, I've really been a fan of Faith, and I've been a fan of Jody Houser's writing on Faith in the other Faith series. But here in this 4-issue event comic, where she gets to team up with a lot of the Valiant Universe heroes, has gone from bad to worse. And at the end here, I mean, this art is by Carrie Nord, but I don't even recognize it as Carrie Nord art. I'm not sure what the story is behind why the art looks the way it is, but it just has a very incomplete feeling. It's not a horrible art style, but it just doesn't seem to do anything for the story. And the story itself has just been so kind of repetitious and kind of dumb. I don't know. I hate to use the word dumb, but I don't know, it just did not click. Basically, they just keep traveling through time to defeat this robot. And we've already gathered what the robot's beef is from previous issues, but apparently the characters have not, so now they have to learn it. It's pretty simple, pretty basic. The solution to the whole problem is pretty simple and basic. I think it's supposed to be funny, but it just didn't seem that funny to me. So this is the comic to avoid, but I suspect, I love this cover. They're having a one-shot coming up, Faith's Winter Wonderland special, and I think they're starting up another series. So there's a good chance I'll keep getting it. This was the one bad Faith series. So yeah, it's puzzling to me how this creative team and how Valiant itself, who usually manages to do pretty decent comics, even their more forgettable comics, what went wrong with this series? I don't know. On a similar vein, only in the sense that it's kind of, Faith is kind of kids friendly. Here is a young adult / children's graphic novel in the making. This is by Brad Espinoza, and it doesn't say how many issues there are. It was $3.99, but it must be like 50 pages or something, or more, 48 pages at a minimum. And it feels like you've read, the first half of a graphic novel here. And Rod Espinoza writes in a seemingly simple way. He writes and draws his own books always. He writes in a seemingly simple way, but he starts building up this world and building it up, and it's a good old-fashioned fantasy world with a few reflections of our own, like religious conflicts and conquerors rewriting history and things like that. But while keeping at the core this fairly innocent woman-girl, between being a woman and a girl, who's a really good fighter and lives in this religiously repressive society that, I don't know, it's kind of like the society's trying to be religiously repressive, but hasn't quite worked out all the kinks yet on repressing the people. And there's all these different religions, but there's one dominant religion of the conquerors who's trying to take over. And these kind of innocent teenagers are going off to join the band of adventurers, although I think the band of adventurers may just be mercenaries. But we'll see. So yeah, it's just it's great for kids. But if you like kids fiction, you might enjoy this. It doesn't have any levels of irony or why is it suddenly getting dark in this picture? I'm going to go turn on another light. Well, that didn't seem to help a whole lot. You're hearing creaking on my bed because I'm sitting on my bed as I shoot this. Or the bed of our guest room, actually. There's no irony or adult layer, so to speak, or there's a little bit of a sexual element. There's all these men who want to marry her or date her, and she just sort of goes, ha ha ha, go away, leave me alone. But on the whole, it's just what it is on the surface. It's although again, that's not fair. Like there was all the religious stuff and everything, but it's just kind of pure story, pure fantasy story that you could read with the whole family. So I'm really looking forward to the next issue of Adventure Finders. I'm not sure what I think about that title, Adventure Finders, but other than that, it's a really cool book, and I don't know how often it's going to come out or how long. It's definitely to be continued at the end of this issue. It's just the opening salvo of the story, Into the Woods, next issue. So that's interesting. And I don't know very much about Antarctic Press at all, but Rod Espinoza always seems to do his work with them, although then, like his hardbacks, some of them have come out from Dark Horse and other bigger publishers. But so I'd love to know the inside story behind Rod Espinoza and his business model, if he has one. He also had a series for young adults called Neotopia. That was also a very good graphic novel series. Speaking of young adults and children's stuff, there's Spy Seal, another enjoyable but not very deep installment in Spy Seal. If I had any complaints, it would be that this world could have become a little richer. There's a little bit of fun element about the hero, the Spy Seal, being attracted to this bird spy that he works with, and his so that comes into play a little bit, and that's a fun little touch. But it continues to be, this fun art, fun settings, in some kind of Swiss chalet type of town, and skullduggery and spy doings back in the early or mid 60s. So it just continues on to be enjoyable. I love the coloring and everything, but apparently next issue is the finale. And maybe the finale of this story, which is called the Corton Steel Phoenix. With any luck, he'll continue it afterwards. I'm a little, for a $3.99 book, I think there's 16 or 17 pages of story here. It's a 24-page total package rather than the usual 32. And of course, things like Adventure Time, which are, I don't even know how many pages this was. Like I said, probably a 50-page story. So that's a little disappointing, but it's such a fine little thing of its own that I still am happy to be getting it. Love that cover too. What's the back cover? Yep. Okay, so yeah, then even quirkier and harder to describe is the 1,000 Yard Stare, which is a story about Shaky Kane, the artist, and David Hine, the writer, basically, although focused on Shaky Kane, the artist, which is interesting to know that it says story script by David Hine and just art by Shaky Kane, but it's all narrated by Shaky Kane. It's about Shaky Kane doing a comic book on his own without David Hine. So that's very intriguing. But the art is great. Shaky Kane is as good or better than ever. This is himself. And it's interesting because he starts off kind of, early middle-aged looking, but as the story progresses, he makes himself look older and more worn down by the end, he's quite the worn out old fogey. I don't know if that's on purpose. But this has a wonderful comic within the comic, so it contains the comic that Shaky Kane supposedly did on his own for Image Nation Comics. But we know that the script was actually written by David Hine, so it's all David Hine pretending to be Shaky Kane. And in a way, this might even be a sort of secret spin-off of Cowboys and Insects. This character could possibly be the boy from Cowboys and Insects, having moved to the big city and become warped by his experiences, but probably not. But anyway, and I don't know if this Ramona character is just made up for this issue or has appeared. I can't remember if it's appeared in other Kane and Hine books. So anyway, this, if this artwork's appealing to you, it is kind of in a completely different way than Spy Seal. It's a comic book for grown-ups that evokes the pleasures of childhood, monster movies and simpler days of Lee and Kirby superheroes and monster comics and everything, but then also has these odd characters in it that, I don't know, evoke a little bit of maybe Gilbert Hernandez or something like that. So it's like the combination of Lee and Kirby and Gilbert Hernandez, perhaps. So I highly recommend it. I really loved it. I hope there's more Shaky Kane, more David Hine and Shaky Kane, or Shaky Kane on his own comics to come pretty soon. It's hard to wait between one-shots. Wonder what Shaky Kane is doing with all his time, or does it take him 6 months to do a comic like this? Perhaps. I don't know. Speaking of a comic that seems like it must have taken a long time to draw, we've got Maestros by the most excellent artist, Steve Scroce, I think I've heard his name pronounced, with colors by Dave Stewart, and you can't usually go wrong with colors by Dave Stewart. And the colors are excellent here, with this character who, to my eye, looks like Neil Gaiman. And what we have here, again, kind of in the variation of children's stuff for adults, the basics of a lot of the elements of this story are the elements of a children's fantasy novel, a Narnia, a Harry Potter, and that kind of thing, and Lord of the Rings and everything, but then with lots of sex and graphic violence just thrown right in there. But really, the basic psychology of the story is still the children's story, so that it's kind of this funny thing. But it's delightful for us adults who still like those fantasy stories and perhaps have some nostalgia for it and enjoy the subverting of it to some extent. It's both, in my mind, it's both true to that kind of story and subverting it a bit, like with the violence, a bit of the grossness. It kind of, there are moments where it reminds me of Jeff Darrow, another person who works with Stewart. And then there's other moments where it reminds me of, I gotta skip this page, where it reminds me of the look of Little Nemo in Slumberland, particularly the remake of it by IDW with the Rodriguez art and the wonderful colors in that. So it veers from sort of the horror and the whimsical fantasy, I suppose. I love this talking sword whose name is Backstabber. It feels like a world you could explore a lot. And so it's not a story. It's a good, solid story. Again, in a weird way, it's a good, solid story, just like that actual children's fantasy Adventure Finders is. It builds up its world. There's nothing other than it being a bit more violent and sexed up than you're used to. There's nothing off-putting about the storytelling. It's good, solid, old-fashioned storytelling, and you're working your way in the story. The second half, we get a lot of a flashback to sort of how all this got set up, who our characters are, and the conflicts there. I guess another adultish aspect of it is that his father, who he's going to have to take the place of, obviously is not a very good person. So the evil wizard who killed him, certainly seems very evil, but his father was kind of an evil wizard too. So yeah, I really dug this, and really looking forward to more. This is another comic that, for your $3.99, I assume this is one of those ones where they give you more in the first issue than later, but this was 32 whole pages of comic book. The actual pages of comic book story, there were 32 pages. I counted them. So if you like fantasy stories, I highly recommend this. Again, I kind of wish I didn't use words like highly recommend. I liked it a lot. I really enjoyed it. You might or might not. I don't want to go tell people what comics to buy. I just want to share my thoughts on them. So sorry about that. Yeah, this has some great lines too. I mean, I was a bit surprised that Scroce, to my knowledge, doing his first writing, is a pretty sophisticated, clever writer. He kind of weaves the different dialogues and character and everything really well. So yeah, I love it actually when I find a good writer artist all in one, because that's still kind of my comic book ideal. So because sometimes it can, on the other hand, it can go horribly badly, and you really wish they would work with a writer, at least as a co-writer or something. But this is extremely promising, and I hope it goes on for quite a while. Although the amount of work that goes in the art, I imagine he's going to need long breaks, or maybe he's written and drawn most of a whole graphic novel already, and he's just doing it in issues, and this will be a shorter run kind of thing. I don't know if they've announced anything about that. Anyway, I'm going to read another comic or two before I go to bed. I might read Kid Lobotomy next. I have a couple of others I'd like to read, like The Fighting American still. And I will almost assuredly be back tomorrow night with another video. Talk to y'all later.